The 42nd hexagram is something always very interesting to me. The nature of what completion is, this hexagram. The expansion of the resources which maximizes the development of full potential. Full potential can only be realized when cycles are completed. When cycles are completed, potential can be realized. The 42nd gate is part of the abstract experiential process. It's the first abstract gate that we have met so far in our movement. And as such, it represents the human way, because the abstract process is about the human way. It is about the experiential way in the world. The sun in the 42nd hexagram throughout the lower trigram and most of the fourth line, this is called the right angle cross of Maya. It includes the 42, the 32, the 61, and the 62. Completion is completion in the mechanics of the Maya, in the real world, in the lifetime, in the form. This is all about the ability to work in form. And the 42nd gate is understanding how form develops or learns or grows. Form grows through completion of cycles. We know that in terms of how our bodies develop, how life operates. The first line is therefore an indication about how the form must come to completion, how we complete the process of the form. And it says through diversification. Remember, this is part of the format energy of the abstract human way. The human way is diversification. That is the way. And in order to be completely diversified, in being completely diversified so that we go out in all directions, we ultimately can reach a point of completion. The Venus in detriment, a tendency when surplus resources are available to centrifugal application, decadence. In the White Book, too much expansion can lead to decadence. In trying to complete things, if you are not clear about what you can complete, it only leads to distortions. And the Maya, and this is part of the cross of the Maya, is full of delusion and illusion. Everyone who begins their life process coming in on this cross, they struggle with illusion and delusion in their life. Diversification brings that. It brings the dreams of being this and that and that and that and that and that. And you have all of these myriad possibilities that are available. So much of it that it can burn you out. The more a 42 has to complete, the more in danger they are of burning out. Remember that in the circuitry, the line of burnout in the 30th hexagram is in the fourth line. It's a harmony to all first lines. You know, the fourth line and its inherent weakness, it can burn out, it can be pulled from power. And it is the harmony to the first line, always. When you get beyond the first line, remember that the first line, because it's personal, because it's the foundation, it may never complete anything. Because it may never find something worth completing. And it may end up early in life getting into something that's not for it and spending the rest of its life doing it and never feeling complete. This has to do with understanding your design, not the nature of a line. It has to do with being yourself. It has to do with following the nature of what you are. then those things operate properly. Remember something, when you look at a design, when you look at a body graph, every single one of the lines that are involved in that particular design are all linked to each other by genetic continuity into the whole. You can see everything about a human being from the surface. All human beings are stuck on the surface. Very few human beings on this planet live out their type. That's the very beginning. If you don't live out your type, none of your lines work properly anyway. They just don't. You don't enter into things properly. And if you don't enter into things properly, if you don't enter into things as yourself, you cannot expect any of that to operate correctly. It will not. In fact, as you read, as we go through all of these lines, understand that if you're being yourself, it doesn't matter what lines you have. You can just look at your design and see that you're it. And that's you. Everything else will just be correct. This process of looking at our lines and studying our lines is because we're not living out our nature. So we look at them and we explore them. But understand, if you live out your nature, you will enter into things correctly. And the 42, so important for them to enter in correctly because it is their way to complete. They're not quitters. Best that they put their energy to work in something that is correct for them. The second line, identification. Recognition and acute capitalization of trends. So often I come across people who have this line or whatever, and they don't, they think that's just an inherent gift, They can capitalize on trends, but it's a second line. They don't know that that's their gift. They don't even know that that works. Somebody has to knock on their window and say, "Excuse me, I noticed something about you. You're really good at identifying things that can go on for a long time." Because that's really what it's all about. Being able to see what can go through a full stage of development that can really grow. But it's not like that's something that's up front with them. It has to be called from them. What do you think about this thing? You think this thing will last? You ask a 42-2 that question. What do you think about beanie babies? Or is that what they're called? Beanie babies? Beanie bags? Something? I don't know. Whatever, anyway. What do you think? You ask you ask 42-2, are they going to last? They'll be able to tell you, but you have to call it out of them. If they offer that to you, don't trust it. Don't buy the stock they tell you to buy. All of that is about understanding the nature of the line structure and then never forgetting somebody's design, because it all fits together back into the design. It's a nice little package. So the second line of identification, the power for growth through participating in trends. Yes, great, but you've got to be pulled to them. You have to be pulled to it. You have to be called to it. The moment you're called to it, you can see things other people can't see. You can see whether it'll last or whether it won't last, whether it'll work or whether it won't. All of that stuff, you've got to be called to it. It's the magic of a second line. The Venus in detriment, an aesthetically motivated withdrawal in times of progressive change. Think about what that's like. You're in your room, you're doing your own thing, you're listening to records. And every day somebody's pounding at your window saying, "Hey, look, why don't you get a CD? Or at least cassettes?" I mean, those records deteriorate, they break down, the sound gets destroyed, it's squeaky, and this person says, "Leave me alone. I don't want to buy a CD. Today it's actually, I don't want to buy a computer." There's still these people left out in the world who haven't made that step yet. And that's a perfect line for them, eh? No, I like my pen. I really do. I don't want to get into all of that, eh? Now you can't say to them, "Look, this is your line. We now want you to be a progressive. Buy a computer." You can't do that to them. That's not who they are. You're not Mr. Fix-It. This is about just saying to them, this is what is there for you. Aesthetically motivated. I don't like computers. It's ugly. You know, all this hum and buzz and warp and woofing. I like my piece of paper and the pen and the ink and the flow. You know, that's okay. The whole thing about them is that they recognize the trend as well and that they don't want to have anything to do with it. And they have the same gift as the exalted to recognize whether that trend is going to last or not, as long as it's called out of them. Third line. You can see right away from this third line that it gives the name to the structure of third lines. Trial and error. The 42nd gate. 42nd gate is something that is very, very important. There is because it's the format that runs the life process, the human experiential process, each and every one of these lines can be a deep, deep meditation if you apply them to the collective experience of humanity, because each of them are. This third line of trial and error. In times of increase, mistakes are a natural part of the process. In trying to complete things, that's what in times of increase means. In trying to complete things, there is always going to be difficulties along the way. Completion is a task. The power to accept mistakes as part of growth. Oh, this is very exalted. This is the human way. You see, there's no real diversification unless there's trial and error. And this is the format energy that drives trial and error in the world experience. Very important for us. Mars exalted. The energy and assertion to turn mistakes into advantages. You know, this is where Mars is so beautiful. You know, you got the kid on the bicycle and he falls down and he gets up and he falls down, he gets up, falls down, gets up, and finally rides. It's a wonderful thing. This is a beautiful energy that's at work. The moon in detriment, a moodiness that in error may succumb to brooding and unnecessary caution. Mistakes give power to moodiness and caution. That's okay. You know, that's a wonderful thing to learn to be able to say to yourself. You know, you read a line and you go, that's okay. Doesn't matter what line it is. You know, every time you read a line, just go, that's okay. You know, it's a real good thing to keep in mind, eh? That's okay. It is okay. It is what it is. Right? In times of error, what happens to these beings is the way in which they learn is that they learn through pain. Well, yeah. What to do? You know, the mistakes hurt them. It hurts them because the most difficult thing in the world for somebody with a 42 is not to be able to complete something. To do a half-assed job, to jump out in the middle. It is painful for them. You know, all kinds of depression exists in the format energies themselves. All kinds of depression. This is the place where chemical depression is bred in the body. So one of the things to recognize about this trial and error is that it can bring on depression, not being able to complete, usually seen in relationships or in people trying to start enterprises or new ways of life or whatever the case may be. The fourth line. We move into the upper trigram where the fourth line plays its dual role of expressing what the lower trigram has developed and at the same time establishing a new perspective. The fourth line is called the middleman. And the middleman is the quintessential manifestation of the mediator, that's the moon. The maturity to bring growth through mediation. This is about externalizing collective experience. Remember now that we are in a collective gate, and the keynote of a collective gate is to share. And that sharing is not personal, it is impersonal. And that this is the first transpersonal line, this line of externalization, of being fixed, of being the missionary, of being the one that really has a one single track. Where the gift to establish and maintain relationships is ill-suited in this position to act in mediation, where harmony must take a backseat to pragmatism. These people know exactly what to externalize. They know exactly what form needs to be completed. The exalted does that regardless of their relationship with the other. And the detriment doesn't, because they try to accommodate the other in being surprised that the other is even there. I mean, think about that. We know that the fourth line is there to externalize, but it does not have social skills. It's not the fifth line. Yes, it knows it has to reach out to the other side, and it has to externalize its fixed view to the other side. But it's not very social. And yet at the same time, we know that the fourth line is a place where we have instability and transition. So we know, at the other hand, that there's a part of it that is sensitive to the response on the other side, that is sensitive to the relationships that exist when they meet the other and they try to externalize. This is about getting other people to help you, or organizing other people to be able to complete things together. So either the fourth line has enough influence, the exalted, to be able to pull them along, or it ends up in a situation where it tries to soothe the relationships in order to be able to get along. You know, in order to avoid the abdication, they try to bend to the will of the majority. Without, the oak tree, bending without breaking, so that they can keep their externalization. Remember, the fourth line can bend. It is only when you get to the end of the fourth line and you get into the juxtaposition that you have absolute rigidity. A lack of maturity in the White Book, where the power to harmonize distorts mediation and limits growth. The problems that come with the fourth line not being well equipped to be social, and having to deal with that at the expense of being able to deliver their information, to be able to do their organizing job. When you move to the juxtaposition, you have the juxtaposition cross of completion. And these are completion fanatics. Fortunately, there's not many in the world, as a percentage anyway. And we do need them. It's not like I think they're bad. Their way is that they must complete. And these are beings that can be absolutely shattered if they don't have that possibility to be able to complete. They have a fixed fate. Completion is everything for them. Please recognize that if you meet a child that has the 42-4 and has their design in the first line, so that you have a juxtaposition, it's a 4-1, that these children have to be educated very carefully about what they get involved with. Because whatever they get involved with, they will have a lifetime obsession in needing to complete it. They're fixed on that. They're fixed on growth. By the way, sometimes you can see that as a biological problem. These are often people who have problems with growth hormones in their body. And it can be both stunted, or it can lead to very rapid growth in the body. But that's another story. When we get to the fifth line, we get to the line of universalization, we get to the general and the heretic, and we have the left angle cross of limitation. So important that the transpersonal lesson that moves through the 42 is that it is all Maya, says the 42. It's all Maya. And the juxtaposition cross says, yes, it's all Maya, let's finish it. And the left angle cross says, you can't, it's all limited. Just moving through telling the story. So this cross of limitation, what it's saying is, that the whole process of completion in itself is a necessary limitation. And that if we fulfill that limitation, we transcend the cycle itself. This is the whole thing about completion. The great power that comes to us the moment that we complete something. We derive energy from that completion. It's like building a wheel. Once you build that wheel, the moment it starts turning, you derive energy from that. So we're building on these cycles, and as we build on these cycles and complete them, we get more and more power from that, greater and greater experience in that sense. Fifth line, self-actualization. The fulfillment and actualization of purpose as a natural path whose reward is a healthy sense of self rather than the power and influence that naturally follow. Now what that says is to be yourself, to fulfill the form for the form's sake, to complete things for completion, nothing else. To finish things, to finish them, and nothing else. That the moment that that can be done, that's the moment that all the rewards come. All of them. Again, we go back to the fifth line as a troubleshooter line. What you have in that is that you have the general that's sitting off on the side, you have the seducer that's out there, that in times of crisis can bring practical provisions. So this fifth line, this self-actualization, this is the most practical way. And these are beings that are brought in because they understand that if you bring things to an end, everything is going to be better. You know, all's well that ends. And you don't need the well after that. All's well that ends. You know, it's over, it's done. Okay, you can get on to the next thing. Think about the torture in human lives, that you do not complete things and you carry them unfinished within you, and how much pain that brings. How it distorts your use of time and energy in your life. How it takes you away from your nature and your purpose. Self-actualization is very, very important. That message is that in the experience of being human, to complete the experience is the most important thing. Get it over with. Then you can figure out what it was worth, what it was about, and whether or not you ever want to do that again. Get it over with. Venus in detriment. Self-actualization as a strictly inner experience that may demand or result in a reclusive nature. And of course, this is all part of the fifth line process. What this is really saying is that there is no way that I can call the collective to complete things when they're not ready. And when they're not ready, I'll look after myself, I'll go sit on the farm, and I'll take care of business. And when the right time comes, and there's the appropriate crisis, and they come to me and say, will you, then is the right time to be able to do that. Inner growth that empowers reclusiveness. It's so important for all fifth lines to realize that they can't be out too long. They always have to withdraw at some point. And that their power only works when it's called upon because what it offers is practical. The most practical thing about human experience is that when you're in trouble and when you're stuck, finish it. Finish it. Then it's done. Then we can clarify it, we can encode it, we can store it as history, we can understand it as experience, and it's done. Sixth line. Nurturing. It says a natural instinctive nurturing of others. Now, all of the discussions that we've had so far about the sixth line, here what the sixth line is going to be assessing is whether or not both completion and the one who seeks to complete, or the group that seeks to complete, can actually complete. That's their gift. to be able to see whether that is really worthwhile, whether that is something that they can complete, whether or not they are wasting their energy in that. It is a natural and instinctive nurturing of others. By the way, the 42-6 often has a difficult time when they're young. They seem to be pushing other people to complete things that they themselves don't complete. And that can be very offensive. I know how you can finish that, Dad. Well, why don't you? They get into a lot of trouble because they can see the way that things can be completed. But of course they get burnt again, sixth line, they get burnt when they're young. And then they sit back and they watch all that and they laugh at those people who think that they can do something, that they can actually complete it. They have their whole process. The line, though, is very gentle. That is, there is this nurturing of others. There is this capacity when they are asked. Reclusiveness is built into it. When they are asked, do you really think that we can do this? Yes, I think you can do that. Boy, that gives them a lot of energy. That's the value of six lines. They can really set off a wave of energy. They can send the whole community down a new path following the five because that is their way. That's their gift. Saturn in detriment, a restrictive and malefic materialism that is self-alienating and encourages aggression. The refusal to share the benefits of growth with others. Yeah, good. Why not? Somebody's got to do that. Somebody has to be that. And in being that, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with it. That's just our trip. It is going to serve its own purpose, after all. Right? To know how to complete things is an economic advantage. It just is. If you know what can work and what can be completed, if you can go through that cycle and you can do it again and again and again and again and again, that's called being able to do very well in the world. It can be quite successful. And if you got burnt when you were young, telling everybody else how to be just as successful, you got to finish this, got to finish that, got to finish that, and all of them told you to mind your own damn business, why should you give them anything? After all, you just go about what your nature is. The genetic nature of this being is to take advantage of recognizing what can work, what can be completed. And by the way, those are the kind of people that can end up being very successful entrepreneurs who build large factories that employ a lot of people, who have sales staff that employ a lot, who end up providing people who work in shops with jobs because they have stuff to sell and so forth and so on and endlessly. It's not about being prejudicial about the nature of a line. It's about those people who have that understanding, yes, you do have that gift. Be very, very clear about what you enter into because you have to complete it. That's all. It's only about the mechanics of that.